I don't know how I started recording already, but I guess here we are. I'm gonna be answering some controversial bookish questions. We're gonna go through like the least controversial to the most controversial, because I didn't want to answer some questions that were just, you know, neither here nor there, just like a question like about reading and stuff. But I also wanted to give my opinion on like the deeper stuff. So that's what we're gonna be doing today. And because they are controversial questions, it's obviously, you know, just my opinion. But if you have a different point of view or perspective on that, then comment. Some questions were generated by AI, none other than ChatGPT. Some other ones I thought of myself. So we're gonna be answering lots, basically. Okay, the first question I wrote because I just wanted to answer it. So what is your ranking system? Or like, no, your rating system? My ratings are very all over the place, but they generally fall at 3 stars. Now, it takes a lot for me to hate a book and it takes a lot for me to love a book. But then I was thinking, like, what do I actually think about each of the stars? Just to make things clearer for myself as well as you, if you care. I took my sweet time thinking of these and I'm very proud of them because I think they are very accurate. If I give a book 1 star, it means DNF, a waste of time, space, and brain power. That's just kind of like a given. That's what a 1 star is. Now, if I give a book 2 stars, it means it's like a bad experience you can laugh about in the future. You know, like over drinks, you're just like, oh yeah, you remember that book where something stupid happened. You get the idea. Then if I rate a book 3 stars, I enjoyed it for what it was, but I'm glad that it's over. And that falls for a lot of books. That's why I rate a lot of books 3 stars. But most of the time, like, that's what happens. Like, I enjoyed the book for what it was, but it didn't blow me away. It wasn't bad or anything, but I'm glad that, you know, I finished it. I turned over the last page and I can move on. If I rate a book 4 stars, it means that it impressed me or it hit the spot. Now, when I say hit the spot, I meant like I wanted something specific, I wanted a specific feeling, and I read this book and it gave me that and I enjoyed it. There's certain tropes that will push the book up because I love them so much that if it appears in a book, it's over. I'm gonna love it no matter what. But if it's impressive, then it's something that I either expected it to be kind of boring or even like cliche. So for example, recent book that I read, All Roads Lead Here by Mariana Zapata, I rated 4 stars because it was a grumpy ex-sunshine, which I'm not a fan of, but it impressed me because it wasn't done in a bad way. But then if I rate a book 5 stars, it's a movie in my head I will forever replay. And there's some books that I still think about it to this day, but I obviously don't think about, I don't know how to explain this, but like the words that I read, you know, like I think about the specific scenes that I've pictured whilst reading that book. And it kind of comes back to me every once in a while. And that's how I know like this book has stuck with me. It's not just something that, you know, I read once and then forgot about. It's actually something that is actually a part of me, a part of my brain. That's the rating system. I feel like I completely forgot that we were doing questions because I was so immersed in this answer. What's a popular book that you don't like? I actually need to think about these. I haven't prepared any answers except for the first one. I feel like when the teacher picks on you to answer a question, you're sitting there like, my mind has gone blank. That's literally me right now. Of course, how can I forget? I'm gonna give a book series. I've done a video about it as well, but I do not like Akata. Now, hear me out. 1 or 2 books I liked. They were both 4 stars. The rest of the books fell so completely flat. What I really hate in a book is when the story comes along right, but then there's things thrown in or like things that are revealed out of nowhere and then it's for the convenience of the plot. It doesn't flow naturally in my head because then I'm like, this makes 0 sense. And then it's like, well, now I have to just like not even think about the plot or anything like that, because if I do, then I'm just gonna be not enjoying myself. So that takes me out of the story a little bit. You know, you can watch the video, but that's basically what I most hated about this. It's no longer an unpopular opinion, but I don't like any Colleen Hoover books. But I need a juicy one. There is an interconnected standalone series I'm not a fan of. And before I say the name, I just want to reiterate, I don't think I read this at the right time in my life. I might need to do a reread, but I did not enjoy it when I read it, and that is basically any book by Elsie Silver except for Wild Eyes. The ones that I found really boring were 2 stars and then the rest was 3. If I read it again, maybe I would enjoy it more, but as of now, I'm not obsessed with this series. I am a tough critic. Just because I say like I didn't enjoy a book, no, I don't even think I'm a tough critic. It's because I have very specific types of books that I love, and anything else just kind of falls mediocre for me. Even though I might understand why it's popular, I'm not always connected to it in an emotional way. So that's the answer. Okay, what are your biggest bookish pet peeves? I absolutely hate when the main character, usually the female one, sticks out her tongue. Girl, you're 30 or 40 years old and you're sticking out your tongue on every page. Okay, this is another specific one. There's two specific ones, but they bother me so much. For me, it's because I see it so often that I'm like, no, we can't do this again. Okay, so the first one, when the time isn't kind of accurate, if that makes sense. So if two characters, it's been told that they were sitting at the table for an hour now, or like 2 hours or whatever, discussing, but the author includes exactly what they've said in that supposed hour, and it consists of 3 sentences. And it's like, well, maybe the best way to do this is to record yourself as if you're the character speaking and see if that's an hour long. And then the third one, last one, is when it kind of feels a bit two-dimensional, when you're kind of focusing on like 2 characters because they're speaking, but the rest around them are like no longer existent. Or like if there's a character that was really prominent but then just disappeared and you have no idea what they're doing. I don't know, it just feels so lazy at some points and like two-dimensional, because I know it's hard because I've tried writing before. I wrote one book before. I was like young, but it's hard because I had like a group of 5 people and you have to, in your head, kind of account for every single one on what they're doing in like each scene, because in real life it's not like 2 people are just standing, you know, doing nothing and then the other 2 main ones are talking to each other. Like that doesn't happen. I think the author who can do this well is Rebecca Yarros in Fourth Wing. I mean, people are trying to have conversations in their heads whilst at the same time having it like in real life, and she manages to do it. Okay, the fourth one is, how did you get into reading? Me, I've got a very distinct memory of exactly when I started reading. So I was about 4 years old and I was starting to read. I was at the time born and raised in Lithuania, so I started reading Lithuanian books. I was a late reader. That was considered a late reader, I think. It was about like 4 to 6 years old, but I managed it. I had this book, I know exactly what it was about. It was about a hedgehog and a fox going on a running race, and the hedgehog outsmarting the fox. And I just kept reading it over and over. I kept practicing, and lo and behold, I learned how to read. But then I moved to England and I didn't speak English, and I also couldn't read or write. But we did have, in primary schools, we had these books that you always had to carry like around in your backpack and read every night. And my mum, I mean, it was torture, but it helps. She made me read the entire, like, it's not like a big book. It consists of like 10 pages of like a few words on each page. So I had to read everything to her in English as well as translate it in Lithuanian. Like, it was around summer. I remember like this one specific time, and everyone was just out like playing and whatever, and I'm translating these sentences, but I mean, it did help. So then my dad actually got me a library card. He surprised me one day after school. He's the kind of person who'd be like, oh look, like this might be fun, you should try it. And I was reading children's books here and there, but it wasn't very consistent. So I went to the shop and I was like, oh my god, this book is like for 50p. It wasn't like a children's book, it was about tsunami. I don't know, I just wanted to read. Like, I didn't care, because at that point I didn't have like social media. I only discovered booktube a little bit later on, so I was like, oh my god, this is so bad. But I still read the books. It was in the works. It's basically like an art and craft shop that has also books in it for cheaper. I did read a lot of them, and that's when I first started like getting a bookshelf. I had like this one above my bed and just kept putting books on there. And then I got into booktube, and that's when I found out all the books everyone that was talking about. Again, the reading wasn't consistent. I think I read like about about 30 books a year, something like that. But nowadays I became more book focused. So now I read, last year I read just a bit over 100 books. And that was the first time I read over 100 books. I just had such a big TBR that I was like, okay, let's actually read something. And I read something, and here we are now, carrying on reading. Okay, this question I think I'm passionate about, but it says thoughts on tropification in books. I don't know what tropification you're talking about, because these things have been in books for years this existed. Okay, The Chosen One has been around for probably decades and centuries at this point. Come on, Romeo and Juliet, rival families, that type of thing, star-crossed lovers, these things have been around for a long time. But now that I think more people are writing and publishing, and then there's the introduction of self-publishing as well, so loads of people are writing and they're putting the things that they love, or these like cliches, in their books. And these things have been around for ages. It's just that it's more common now, and it's up to you if you're the type of person to be like, I'm so sick of this, I want to read something new, even though what can really be new? Do you know what I mean? Or you could be the type of person who's like, I want to use these things to get recommendations because I love these things. Why would I not want it to be seen in other books? So that's the two camps. But I think on the very rare occasions when books are kind of made up of only tropes, it can get quite boring. But then again, there's always a person who's gonna love that no matter what. So for me, it's not a big deal. Me personally, I don't see a problem with tropes at all. And if, a writer wants to write about a brother's best friend, single dad, enemies to lovers, small town, cowboy romance, false proximity, blah blah blah, then you can write that. Okay, next question. What is your biggest hot take? I actually thought of this and I forgot what I was going to say. Readers should read only the books that they're interested in. I know it's like good to go out your comfort zone and try something new, but realistically, if you know that's a type of book that you won't like, then why read it? Even if it's like really popular, whatever, if you know you're not gonna like it, why read it? There is no point. And I've fallen for this trap as well. For one, I'm never gonna read a horror book. That is one thing that I will never get into, horror, because I'm way too of a scaredy cat to get into horror. And even if there is a very popular horror book recommended, I will not read it, because I know if I read it, I'm gonna hate it. So why do that? And then you're gonna give the book 1 star, even though it might have not deserved it. It's just, your opinion, because you chose to read the book that you won't like. Next question, favorite character of all time. My favorite character oh my god, I don't know what just happened there. My favorite character of all time, I don't know if it still holds up, but my favorite character of all time is Aelin from Throne of Glass. Is my favorite character. I've read this such a long time ago. Besides that, I don't think I've come across a character that I absolutely love, like to my core. Maybe also Daisy Hates. I think I relate to her a lot. I have a specific type of character that I want to read about that would become my favorite character of all time, but I haven't read a book yet with that in it, unfortunately. And also, I don't know if it's me, it's probably me, but when I read a book and it's from first point of view, it's hard to kind of distinguish my own reading monologue, if that makes sense, from the character. I'm thinking of these like female characters and I'm thinking like, what do I actually know about them? Not much. Anyways, Aelin, next question. Thoughts about smutting books. I don't know why people have a problem with this. I swear, some people love to create problems out of nothing and give everyone a headache. First of all, sex is normal. Okay, you can watch a romance movie, you still see like a sex scene, it's just that you can't see the private parts because first, it's a real person. But like in a book, you can just read about it, about the action. You don't need to see anything, it's just like, it happens, It shouldn't be stigmatized at all because it's normal. Unless it's like unconsensual or something, then that might be uncomfortable to read about. But if it's just 2 people making love, what's the problem? There is a very big difference between an erotica book and just a book where there is a sex scene in it. I read a 700-page book. Guess how many pages of it had a sex scene in it? Probably 3, okay? 3 or 4, 100% on my Kindle. So people are saying, oh, you're only reading Fairy Smart or whatever. Okay, but what are the rest of the pages then? What are they? Exactly. When you talk about this topic, first of all, you need to mention whether you're talking about erotica or normal books, okay? Because they are 2 different things. If there's like 3 pages of someone inserting something into someone else, then maybe it shouldn't be as big of a problem. And sometimes even me, I will skip some of the scene because for me sometimes it gets too boring or too old. Like, you know, we've been through this 5 times, I don't need the 6th one. In some books that happens, not all, but I would only look at dialogue just to see like if there's anything important that I missed, and you can just skip those scenes. But I think in my case as well, my specific taste is that it's kind of like the reward at the end of like a slow burn. For me, if I read, you know, 500 pages of the angst, the slow burn, everything in the middle, getting to that scene is like kind of like a reward. We've reached the peak and now yeah. Okay, can you separate the work from the author? Now these are some more controversial questions. Can you separate the book from the author? No person is perfect, of course, which means that we've all done some level of things in life that you might not want to share to society. But what that means to me is, unless you're a criminal, most authors are problematic in some way. You know, we just have the luxury to not be kind of looked into. What I mean to say is, if you stopped reading books from problematic authors, even the ones that you don't know about, then you would have no books to read almost. I want to leave it there. I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly, but honestly, if we just looked at it as a surface level question, you can separate the book from the author. And if you think, oh, why should I care? I mean, there's just a book, why should I care about the author? Well, by buying the book, you are supporting the author. That's the only thing. So if an author really is problematic and you really love the book, I mean, it's not nice to be kind of made to feel guilty about liking the book. I don't think that's right to do. Or like throw out all the books that you own by that author. Unless the author is like a terrible person, like a criminal level, then maybe try not to support them at least. If you want to read a book, just read the book. Okay, next question. Do book to movie or show adaptations ruin the book? I think it depends. In one way, if you're looking at it like from like how you look at the characters, then it can definitely. Sometimes if I look at a fan art of a book that I'm reading, I can't unimagine the fan art, and if it's someone that I don't want to imagine but my brain is like picturing them as a character, it becomes a bit frustrating. If you already read the book and then you go on to watch the movie or TV show, it shouldn't really ruin the book, because if it's different from the book, then you're almost getting like a different version, like a different story in general. So I think it shouldn't ruin the book unless you're in the middle of reading it, even if it's like a terrible movie. I mean, that would be terrible for the author who wrote this book, just to have like a bad TV show made out of it and then people be hating the book. Next question. Do certain genres get dismissed as lesser fiction or literature fairly? No literature is lesser. Even modern books compared to classic books. Modern books are definitely not lesser than classics. I think there are a lot of important books written in this day and age. And in terms of other genres, which, you know, usually it's romance, fantasy, romantasy, they're the kinds of things that get put down. And that is terrible. In these romance books, like, you know, it's kind of a given that it ends on like a happy ending, but everything in between that happens, in a lot of cases, it is so messy, and you know, you can relate to it and kind of feel less alone, which I think is just as important. And that's what's special about it. It's not even escapism, but it's like, if your life is terrible, if your love life is terrible, I don't want to read about 2 characters falling in love and ending up together and having kids and getting married and whatever to actually still have hope. Competition is always tricky. Like, in terms of books, competition ruins everything, okay? We should not be competing for anything in the bookish world, because most of the time it ends up in a mess like this, where certain people are saying, oh, you're only reading fairy smart, you read romance and they're bad books, you need to read like classics about like society and whatever and history. And then these things happen and then everyone's left just upset about it. Oh my god, I got it in my hair. So yeah, I think no genre is lesser than another, and we shouldn't be deciding which genre is better because every genre is unique in its own way. That's why it's a different category, and there are people for every genre and everything. I mean, you can have a preference for a genre. For example, I love to read romance and I love to read fantasy, and maybe on the side some thriller, even just contemporary fiction. But I definitely wouldn't say that they are the only ones allowed to be written. Okay, next question. Are authors obligated to write about certain topics accurately? Of course, it's very validating to read about a main character maybe suffering from a certain illness or having a certain disability because it's written accurately, whether from the author's own experience or their research and kind of relate to it in a way and feel less alone again. If you were to write about something that you don't necessarily know, if you're not going to write it accurately, don't incorporate it into the main character. We are in their heads. The character will have some thoughts about what they have, and you can't really know that without either experiencing it or talking to other people and trying to write it accurately. But for example, in real life, if you have friends or family or someone you know that suffers with something, as an author, if you write about it, it's only how you see them. When you read the book, then you're seeing it from like a different point of view, and I think you can do that more or less accurately because, you know, what you see is what you write. But when you just include it just for fun, that shouldn't happen, because then what's the point? Unless it's important to the story and you do some research about it, you don't go into too much detail, but you kind of like know that it's there, then that's fine also. It just depends on how you handle it and how you express it on the page. I don't know about the word obligated. You don't have to write it accurately, but you should always try to get some things right, you know, basic human decency. Okay, should book reviews and ratings be taken seriously? If you read a book that you know you'll hate and you give it 1 star, but it's actually not a bad book, you're putting off someone else reading it potentially. It's very subjective. But yeah, another thing is also being subjective and objective. I try to be objective. I kind of say about the things that happened and say why I don't like that. But you know, someone else can go and be like, I love it. But there are some where it's entirely subjective, and that can happen with some books because some books are just for someone. For example, if I relate to a book heavily, that will definitely influence my rating. I think you should always take the ratings with a grain of salt. Me personally, sometimes I go on Goodreads to the book that I want to read. I look at the bad reviews to see why I should read it. Sometimes reviews, they say things that I'm like, oh my god, I would love that, but it's a 1-star review. I mean, at the end of the day, you will never know if you don't read the book. Sometimes I go after reading the book to the reviews just to see what other people think about, because I can't voice or formulate my own opinions just yet. So I kind of just like see what the vibe is and see if I can relate to any review. So they can be used for many reasons, but also like, you know, some books have like very sensitive topics and it's not always said in the beginning of the book, and reviews sometimes do say like, don't go into this book thinking like, you know, it's a light fluffy book. Please know what you're getting yourself into. Okay, should self-published books be held on the same level as traditionally published books? It's a bit of a hard question. I don't think it depends how much a book is edited, how many people have gone over the book, if it's traditionally or self-published. Whatever it is that's gone into that book, it does not matter as much as the author themselves. Okay, any writer who writes a book, it kind of reflects their own, you know, writing style, writing experience. If you're a bad writer, to put it bluntly, you're gonna write a bad book, no matter if it's self-published, traditionally published. I just wanna like make it clear that self-published books and traditional published books, not either one is better than the other. There are traditionally published books that are absolute shit. They're still published. There's going to be some good books from both, and there's going to be some bad books from both. So in that way, I think it should be held on the same level as far as public opinion goes. But it's true that obviously writers that are traditionally published, they have a lot of support. There's a lot of people going through their manuscript, a lot of people checking it. Some self-published authors don't even have the money for an editor. They edit it themselves. But then when you're also editing yourself, you might not realize some things. You might need like a, you know, fresh eye to look over it. So there's that. As in public opinion, we should think as self-published books the same way as traditional published books. They're just, you know, published different ways, but they're both books. Traditional books are supported way more. So you kind of have to take that into account. Okay, last one. Is TikTok ruining books and literature? Sometimes, I'm gonna say it, sometimes even if there is a problem, it's better not to acknowledge it. Yeah, crazy sentence, I know. But at the end of the day, like, leave people's readings alone. They just want to read. Leave them alone. It was a stigma to read for so long because you were a nerd. Now it's finally admirable even to be a reader, and lots of people are reading. At this point, like, nothing can ever be peaceful. And fair enough, you know, there's things about like if they rate that book really highly, even though it's a bad book, it's gonna get pushed out, and it's kind of gonna be like the good books are left behind. I still don't want to put the blame on just readers, because we're just reading our books, just vibing, and then we're being blamed for ruining literature. And there's so many different readers on TikTok. If you're on the romance side, then you're gonna get romance books. If you're on the thriller side, then you're gonna get thriller books. If you're on the classic side, then you're gonna get classic recommendations. It depends on who you watch. So generalizing TikTok all to like just people that read very smart is not right, because that's literally not true and not accurate. Obviously there's some book talk dramas. I'm not talking about them. I'm just talking about the average person posting on TikTok. And then you have to like break it down. So is it the actual pros that are making people read bad books, which then turns people into bad readers and literacy goes down? Or is it what's happening in the book? I think it's such a complicated topic that whatever you say, there's always going to be a rebuttal. I know a lot of people won't agree with this, and I'm fine, but I think like sometimes you just have to be the chill one. I feel like words have left me. Maybe one day I'll do a part 2 and then I'll have a better explanation of my opinions. But that's it for now. Consider subscribing, because we're gonna do more stuff here, just have fun and whatnot, and read. See you next time.